As a former co-owner of 11 Madison Park, he received 4 stars from the New York Times, 3 Michelin stars, and the #1 ranking on the list of the world's 50 best restaurants. As a national
in February. It's been an amazing morning already, but the cool thing is it actually continues to get better. And so we continue on with the summit and get ready to hear from a faculty member, one that when I first heard about him and read his book, thought, man, this is going to be somebody amazing to be on our summit stage. I know you're going to enjoy him. I know you're going to benefit from him.
Unmet expectations can leave people reeling, but we all have the power to do more than expected. Our next speaker is no stranger to exceeding expectations. As a former co-owner of 11 Madison Park, he received 4 stars from the New York Times, 3 Michelin stars, and the #1 ranking on the list of the world's 50 best restaurants. As a national best-selling author, he's empowering leaders in every industry to create a hospitality-first culture. In designing our future, our next guest will inspire us to pull together our best efforts and create a culture of unreasonable hospitality. Please welcome Will Guidara.
If you wouldn't mind just indulging me for a second, I'm very, very happy to be here for a bunch of reasons, but my dad, Frank, and his wife, Juliet, are here with me as well. They're right over there. My dad was my hero growing up. In addition to being my dad, he is my best friend and a lifelong mentor, and we're very close. We talk often, and since I released this book, I've been blessed. I've gotten to go speak to some of the most amazing companies in the world, JP Morgan, the Four Seasons, NFL teams, and we talk most days, and so I always call and tell him where I'm going to be speaking, and he's always impressed. But when I told him I was going to be on this stage, guys, he literally screamed in joy over the phone. And so I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving me the gift of making my dad proud. I appreciate that. I got to 11 Madison Park in 2006. I worked there before buying the restaurant and then selling it right before COVID. In the beginning, the restaurant was a middling brasserie. The food was good, but it wasn't great. The service was friendly, but not very precise. But the dining room, if you've never seen a picture of the dining room at 11 Madison Park, it is truly one of the most beautiful in the world. And I was brought in as a part of the team that was charged with elevating the experience that it would live up to the room itself. In the beginning, when charged with making something better, I did what anyone would obviously do. I doubled down in our pursuit of excellence with the product. In the kitchen, we started hiring cooks who had worked in some of the best restaurants. We got better pieces of equipment. We started sourcing better ingredients. We hired cooks who had worked in some of the best restaurants. In the dining room, we did a lot of the same. We removed some of the tables from the dining room so we could serve a better experience to fewer people. We bought really fancy plates and expensive glassware. We started testing our team on a weekly basis to ensure they had the knowledge required to deliver the experience we were trying to deliver. We were relentless in our pursuit of excellence. And within a few years, it started to pay off. We went from 2 stars in the New York Times to 3 stars in the New York Times to 4 stars. That's the most stars you can get. We went from 0 Michelin stars to 1 Michelin star, and then became the first restaurant in the history of that guide to go from 1 to 3 stars in a single year. We were feeling ourselves, right? We were on top of the city. And then one day I went into the restaurant to go through my normal morning routine. I said hi to the cooks in the kitchen. I said hi to the servers in the dining room. By the way, that's important. Sometimes as leaders, we can be so focused on getting a jump on the day that we don't pause and actually acknowledge the people that we work with. I made myself a coffee, went back to the office, and then started going through the mail. And eventually I stumbled on a letter with the upper left hand of the envelope. It said, the world's 50 best restaurants. This is a big moment for me. I think we all have moments like this, right? Those where you can recall every detail of the moment so vividly because it was that impactful in the story of your life. This was one of those for me because in that list, which had only been around for 5-6 years, my industry had been given a gift, especially restaurants like mine, restaurants who had achieved all of the accolades available to us in our region. It gave us something more to strive for. Because listen, with that list, every restaurant in the world could do better except for one. And I'm not saying that anyone does anything in pursuit of accolades alone, but I don't think we should fool ourselves into believing that they're not healthy motivations for ourselves and in our ability to lead a team around us. So I was fired up. I ripped open the letter and said, congratulations, you've been added to the list of the 50 best restaurants in the world. Come to London in June for the ceremony. Obviously we went. The awards themselves, they're a lot like the Oscars, okay? You get dressed up in your fanciest tuxedo, you go to this larger-than-life auditorium filled with your heroes. For me, the chefs that I looked up to my entire career. But they're different from the Oscars in one significant way, because at the Oscars, if you're nominated for an award, I would imagine when they get to your category, you're pretty desperate that they call your name. Here, if you're in the room, you already know you're one of the 50 best in the world. You just don't know where in the list you fall until you get there. They start at 50, they slowly count down to 1. Here, you are desperate that they do not call your name for as long as humanly possible. We had assigned seating. Now, something about me, I like to gamify pretty much everything in life. I actually think it's one of my superpowers as a leader. Because I don't care how much you like your job, it will always be more fun to play than it will be to work. People have asked me over the years, how did I challenge my team to get better and better and better? I would say I didn't. I just tried to take the entirety of our work and break it up into as many little games as I could. Games we liked playing, and well, anyone who's ever played a game you like playing, you know the more you play, the better you get. But I do like to gamify everything, and so when I saw we had assigned seating, I started looking at where we were sitting relative to where the people who had come in number 1 through 5 the year before we were sitting, trying to gamify it. And I think I started by guessing we were going to come in number 20, and then I tried to be a little more humble. I said maybe it's number 35. Now listen, I'm sure of this fact because there must have been, right? Some of the normal preamble, the welcomes, the thank you for comings from the big debonair British MC at the front of the room before they started, but I don't remember any of that. All I remember was him kicking things off by saying, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick things off at number 50, a new restaurant from New York City, 11 Madison Park. And I was like, gosh darn it. See, turns out, and I never would have known this because we were the first restaurant called. It was my first time there. The assigned seating has nothing to do with where you're going to fall on the list. The real reason they assign your seating is that the camera guys knows where to train the camera so that they can project an image with your reaction on this giant screen in front of the entire room. It's when everyone else, regardless of how they felt, would pretend to be happy and they'd smile and they'd wave. And guys, I literally looked like I'd just gotten kicked in the groin. They finished the countdown, got down to 1. Everyone filtered out of this main room into the adjacent room for cocktails. I remember I was over in the corner, like nursing my wounds over a gin and tonic. But there was one chef, a chef who I went to those awards so excited to meet. His name is Massimo Bottura. He's one of the great chefs in the world. He has a restaurant in Italy that would go on to become number 1. At this point, I was too embarrassed. I'd given up on trying to meet him. And yet he walked directly through the crowd right up to me, extended his hand, shook mine, and in his very thick Italian accent said, hey, you looked really happy up there. Mortifying. But I did what I'd like to think any mature professional would do in a moment of profound disappointment. I left the party early, went back to the hotel, grabbed a whiskey, and started going through the stages of grief. Ultimately landing on acceptance. Because here's the reality. Okay, it is patently absurd to say that one restaurant is the best restaurant in the world, right? There's too many restaurants. It's too subjective. When you earn the top spot on that list, what it really means is that you are the restaurant having the greatest impact on the world of restaurants at that moment in time. We'd been at the restaurant for a while. Our product was awesome. Our food was now some of the best on the planet. Our service was as close to technically perfect as possible. And our dining room was still one of the most gorgeous out there. And it was for those reasons that we got on that list. But when we paused for long enough to really think about it, it became quite clear we hadn't done anything impactful. I'm not sure about all of you, but any time in my career I've set out to achieve an audacious goal, I like to start by studying those who have accomplished it before me, learning whatever lessons I can from them, taking those lessons, making it my own, and then having a go at it myself. And so that night I started thinking about the restaurants that had been number 1. They were all run by chefs. I'm not a chef, I'm a dining room guy. And these chefs were unreasonable in pursuit of the food they were serving, their product. Relentless in pursuit of innovation, What new ingredients could they use? What techniques could they develop? And each of these chefs, in their own way, has influenced how restaurants around the world cook. My dad, he gave me a paperweight when I was a kid. On it, it said, "What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?" He's challenged me at varying intervals over the course of my career and, well, honestly, my life, to ask myself that question, and whatever the most honest answer is, to just try to do that. Saying that far too many people are, well, honestly, scared to say their biggest goals out loud for fear that if they do and don't achieve them, they'll let themselves and those around them down. But that if you don't have the confidence, the conviction to dream your biggest dreams out loud, it is very unlikely you'll ever achieve them. That night, on a cocktail napkin, I wrote, "We will be number one." But a goal without a strategy, well, that's nothing more than a pipe dream. I needed to figure out what our impact was going to be. And so I thought about those chefs. If they became number one through being unreasonable in pursuit of their product and relentless in pursuit of change, we were going to make our impact by being relentless in pursuit of people and unreasonable in pursuit of the one thing that will never change, which is our human desire to feel seen, to feel cared for, to feel loved, to feel a sense of belonging, or just to feel a little bit more welcome. And so underneath, "We will be number one in the world," I wrote those two words, unreasonable hospitality. Next morning, woke up, got on a plane to head back home, looked at those two words, quickly realized I had no freaking clue what that meant. But I think that's okay. I think sometimes as people and as organizations, we can spend so much time trying to perfectly articulate an idea that we never start pursuing anything. I really believe if you feel a connection to a thought, you need to trust in the fact that as you pursue it, it will reveal itself to you along the way. And so I went home and immediately gathered our entire team together for pre-meal. Just raise your hand real quick. Who here has ever worked in a restaurant dining room? Okay, a lot of my people. For those of you who did not raise your hand, pre-meal is the 30-minute meeting we have with our team every day right before we unlock the doors and welcome people in for service. Most restaurants do it, most restaurants waste it. A wasted pre-meal is when you spend the entire time talking about things that could clearly be communicated via an email. In my world, that would be a new dish, a new wine by the glass, a new policy. That meeting is a beautiful opportunity not just to talk about the what, but about the how and the why. It's a moment for leaders to actually stand up and lead their teams, to share moments of inspiration from out in the world, to invite their teams to do the same in return, to talk about the things that will not just make their people better in their jobs, but about the many more things that will make them better in their lives. That meeting, when done well, is when the people you work with cease being a collection of individuals and instead come together as a trusting team, unlocking the collective creativity and capacity required to do anything great. In my restaurant, that 30 meeting was the most important 30 minutes of the day, far more important than any minute we spent actually serving a guest. And if you don't have some version of a pre-meal, a daily huddle in your worlds, I really implore you to figure out how to bring it to life. And if you do, but it's been a while since you've approached it with any sense of intention or creativity, I challenge you to give it another look. There is no lever more powerful to evolve the culture of a team. And in that meeting, every day for weeks, because by the way, repetition matters. If you believe something strongly, you better say it enough times that you grow sick of hearing yourself say it. Otherwise, I guarantee you, you have not said it enough. I said to the team, we are going to be number one in the world. It's going to take time, but we are going to get there, and we're going to do it through unreasonable hospitality. As a leader in that moment, I had two roles. One, to tell the team where we were going, and two, to invite all of them to join me and take a seat at the table as we figured out what that meant. And so we got started right away. In the beginning, we started looking at the entire experience we were serving, breaking it down into all of its little touch points and figuring out how to make as many of them better as we possibly could. I found that when you enhance the least likely touch points in an experience, it can have the greatest impact on the experience as a whole. And over the course of 2 years, we made tons of changes, big changes, and lots of little changes, but the little changes really mattered as well because raindrops make oceans. The culmination of a lot of little shifts on their own can become transformational. But as much as we evolved the experience, I didn't think we'd figured out what it meant to be unreasonable. It's a big word. In my view, it calls you to greatness. And then one day I was in the dining room helping out the team on a busier than normal lunch service. And I was doing what I always do when I try to help out the team. I was clearing dirty plates. By the way, if you're a leader, do that. If you're helping out your team, do the most menial task. It's a meta signal to your team that you'll never ask them to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And it's a reminder, well, that you're pretty good at it. And I found myself clearing appetizers from a table of 4. They were foodies. Europeans on vacation to New York with one purpose, to eat at restaurants in New York. And in fact, this is their last meal. They were heading right to the airport to go back home afterwards. And while I was there, I overheard them talking. And they were going on and on and on about the trip they'd had. They'd been to restaurants like Per Se, Daniel, Le Bernardin, Jean-Georges, and now 11 Madison Park. And if you don't know what those restaurants are, trust in how fancy the names sound. They're the good ones. But while I was doing that, another woman at the table jumped in and said, yeah, but you know what we never got to have? We never had a hot dog from one of those street carts. You know that moment in a cartoon where the light bulb goes off over the character's head? You know, they've had a good idea. As calmly as I could, I walked back into the kitchen, dropped off the plates, then ran outside of the hot dog cart, bought a hot dog, ran back into the restaurant. Then came the very challenging part, which was convincing my fancy chef to serve it in our fancy restaurant. But I asked him to trust me. I told him it was important to me, and eventually he cut the hot dog up into 4 perfect pieces, added a little swish of ketchup and a swish of mustard onto each plate, a little quenelle of sauerkraut and relish. We made them look very fancy. Then, before their final savory course, which at the time was our signature honey lavender glazed Muscovy duck that had been dry aged for 2 weeks, I brought out what we in New York call a dirty water dog to the table. And I explained it. I said, hey, I just want to make sure you don't go home with any culinary regrets. Here's that New York City hot dog. And guys, they freaked out. I've been serving food my entire career, millions of dollars worth, and the fancy stuff too. Wagyu beef, lobster, caviar, and yet I had never seen anyone react to anything I'd served them like they did to that hot dog. You know, athletes are always going to the tapes and they've had a bad game. They do so to identify what mistakes they made to ensure they don't repeat those mistakes. What they don't do often enough, what none of us do often enough, is go to the tapes when we've had a good game to see what we did well, to make sure we keep on doing that thing. That's how you put intention to intuition. It's how you take moments of accidental brilliance and grab onto them and hold onto them and put systems behind them to make sure that they become a part of the fabric of your organization. So I went to the tapes on that hot dog. What happened to make it happen? And what could we all start doing to make sure that things like that would start happening all the time? The first, it just required being present, which is honestly like a little bit of an annoyingly overused phrase these days, but in hospitality, when it comes to people, it's everything. These days, we become so busy, so distracted by these things, so consumed with efficiency that more and more often we have an inability to slow down for long enough that we can actually listen to the people around us. I think we have a flawed relationship with efficiency. We believe the more efficient we try to be, the more efficient we will become. That works to a point, and then it doesn't. Sometimes you need to slow down in order to speed up. I define being present as caring so much about the person you're with that you stop caring about everything else you need to do. We all need to stop caring in order to start caring once in a while. The second, it required the notion that yes, if you want to do anything real in this world, you need to take what you do seriously, and also we all need to stop taking ourselves so seriously. Way too often, we let these self-imposed standards get in the way of us giving the people around us the things that will bring them the most joy. A hot dog in a 4-star restaurant is almost sacrilegious until you look at the way it made them feel. Put differently, in that moment I realized the power of embracing people as they are. It's easy, thank you. It's easy to judge when people come in and they want a hot dog in a 4-star restaurant to decide that they are unworthy of the gifts I am trying to give them. But in that moment, I realized that sometimes we don't need to just serve what we want to serve people, rather try to serve them also what they want to receive. Every day, people come into our worlds who are different than us, who are perhaps a little bit different than we expect them to be, and every day we get to make a choice. Do we ignore them? Do we shame them? Or do we serve them as they are? And the third, Listen, I like to redefine the word hospitality every year or so. I think it's important to do that because if you care about an idea, the better you are at articulating that idea, the better you become at compelling those around you to embrace it. One of my favorite definitions of hospitality, it is about making other people feel seen. And if that's the case, the best way to do it was not to treat them like a commodity, but to treat them like unique individuals. I really do believe I could have given that table a bucket of caviar, a bottle of vintage champagne. It would not have had the same impact as that $2 hot dog. See, in unreasonable hospitality, one size fits one. The greatest gestures are bespoke to the people you're extending them to. Now, I was pretty sure I'd understood what it meant to be unreasonably hospitable. And if that hot dog was our new true north, in those three things we had a roadmap. And so in pre-meal, every day for weeks, I said to my team, go out there, be present, stop taking yourself so seriously, and find one-size-fits-one gestures to convey. They were fired up, they got started right away, but about a month or 2 months in, I realized that we were only doing about one of these things a night. See, I'd made a mistake that a lot of leaders make. I had a good idea, gave the team permission to get on board, but I gave them absolutely nothing in the way of resources to bring the idea to life. If you want to come up with something awesome, you need to make it easy for the team to deploy, and we did not have a ton of extra time to go run errands in the middle of dinner service. So I added a position to the team, someone whose only job was to be on the floor with them every single night and help bring their ideas to life. We called the position the Dreamweaver, named after the iconic song by Gary Wright. And if you've heard it, it's stuck in your head now. Sorry about that. And with the addition of that position, guys, we caught fire. Every night doing countless things like this, little things that cost a little bit of money. One time, a guy told us on the phone when he was making his reservation that he was really into fine dining, but his dad was more of a steak and potatoes kind of guy. He was worried his dad was going to feel overwhelmed. We had these carts, champagne carts on wheels. We'd push up to the table with all of our champagnes by the glass. The Dreamweaver went to every store in the neighborhood, bought every single type of bottled Budweiser. We changed our champagne cart into a Budweiser cart, pushed that over to the beginning of the meal. This guy who was so out of his depth, the moment that came over to his table, he felt at home and went on to have the best meal of his life. We met him where he was, as opposed to asking him to come all the way over to us. Thank you. We did bigger things. One night there was a family of 4 from Spain with us, parents and their children, and we learned that it was the first time the kids had seen real snow. We had these big windows that started snowing. They got super excited. And so the Dreamweavers somehow found a store still open at 8 o'clock on a Friday night selling sleds. When they left the restaurant, there was an Uber SUV parked out front with the sleds in the back, a big thermos of hot chocolate in the front, to take them for the best nightcap of all time, sledding with your kids for the first time in Central Park. Or we did really big things that cost nothing at all. One night, there was a couple dining with us. They'd just gotten married at City Hall. Turned out they had a big wedding planned, but some amount of drama broke out between the families. They decided to 86 it. This was now their wedding night. And you could tell they were forlorn, but still loving their marriage. Our server, the hourly employee, on her own, committed herself to, before the meal was over, figuring out what their wedding song would have been. We slowed their meal down just enough that they were some of the last people in the room, which meant that most of my team was no longer on the clock. Instead, they were up in the private dining room having a little bit of an impromptu staff party, but it wasn't a staff party. It was their wedding reception. When they finished their meal, we brought them into the room. The moment they set foot over the threshold, we played their wedding song, Lovely Day by Bill Withers. We had given them the gift that only we could give them, the gift of a first dance. We were doing countless things like this, and a powerful shift started happening in the restaurant. For our guests, first. For the first time, they weren't leaving saying what an amazing meal they had. They were talking about what a magical experience they'd had. There's the magician duo, Penn and Teller. Teller has an amazing quote. He says, "Sometimes magic is just being willing to invest more time into something than anyone else would deem reasonable." Nothing we were doing was hard. We were just willing to try a little bit harder. But the bigger shift was on our team. I've been working in restaurants my entire life, and I'd never seen a group more happy to come to work. There's a quote by Maya Angelou. I think it's the best quote about hospitality. People will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, but they will never forget how you made them feel. We were making a lot of people feel really good, but the coolest thing, because hospitality is a selfish pleasure, we were feeling even better. Put simply, we were addicted. And we wanted more. But there's a problem with those gestures, right? You need to pick up on something that someone says. You need to come up with an idea. You need to turn it around and give it back. You can't force those things, otherwise they'll feel contrived. Now, to be clear, I don't think we should ever limit our time in only investing into things that are scalable. I think that is the best way to hold yourself back from true innovation. But when you're doing something that isn't scalable and it's working, you need to ask yourself, can I scale it a little bit? So one day, we started asking ourselves this question. We said, can we systemize this at all? And so we closed the restaurant for a day. We brought our entire team in. And when I say our entire team, I mean everyone, from dishwashers all the way up through to ownership. The reason the retired naval captain David Marquet famously said that in most organizations, the people at the top have all the authority and none of the information, while the people on the front line have all the information and none of the authority. It's true. It's also true that to brainstorm real innovative ideas, you need to bridge the gap between authority and information. And we broke them up into groups, and I gave them all this big pad of paper, and I said, hey, I want to do an exercise. We're going to call it pattern recognition of recurring moments. By the way, anyone who has a business, do this. We looked for the things that just happened often, the things that happened time and time again, as often as once a night or as rarely as once every couple weeks. Because if we could identify these things in advance and then determine with some creativity and intention how we wanted to react every time they happened, well, we could start creating magic all the time. I'll give you my favorite example. A lot of people got engaged at a restaurant, fancy restaurant, special occasion spot. If you've ever gotten engaged at a fancy restaurant, I hope they poured you free champagne. If they didn't, you got engaged at the wrong restaurant. But that's just reasonable hospitality. Once we wrote that down on our list, we got to decide as a team how we could make it more awesome. By the way, I use that word awesome a lot. I feel like we get older, we feel the need to be more professional, mature. We stop using words like awesome. If you are in the business of making people happy, which all of us are, that's a big part of your job, just to make as many little things more awesome as you possibly can. This is what we came up with. Tiffany & Co. had their offices across the park. One day I walked over there, started knocking on doors until I met the chief marketing officer. Over the course of a few meetings, I convinced her to give me 1,000 of those iconic Tiffany blue boxes, each with 2 champagne flutes in them. We cleared out a closet in the back of the restaurant. We called it our hospitality toolkit closet. We put the glasses in the closet. Next time someone got engaged with us, we poured them free champagne like we always would have. But what they wouldn't notice was that their glasses looked just a little bit different from everyone else's. When they finished their champagne, we'd take them away, wash them, dry the glasses, put them back in the box, and on their way out of the restaurant, we'd gift them the glasses, thanking them for celebrating with us, congratulating them on their lives ahead. Was it less special for them because we had more in the back? No, it was specific to their circumstance. And I've talked to plenty of people who got engaged there that, in spite of the fact we were serving some of the best food on the planet, don't remember a single thing they ate. But they'll never forget how we made them feel when we gave them those glasses. Thank you. We're not the only ones to have done this. I spoke at Sundance Film Festival last year, and anyone who flew anywhere in the year 2023 can attest to the fact that flights were delayed like constantly. This one was really bad. My flight was delayed 7 hours. I got to the hotel at 4 a.m, exhausted. And as I'm walking in, I'm preparing myself to go through the whole check-in routine when all I want to do is go to bed. But when I walked in, there was just a guy in the lobby, the overnight manager, the only one left working, and he had his arm outstretched with my room key. And he said, Mr. Guidara, you must be exhausted. He had no idea who I was. I was just the last person to get there. He said, here's your room key. Go get some sleep. We can check you in the morning. You know, sometimes the simplest gestures can be the most profound. I went upstairs, fell asleep immediately. The next morning, I have never been more excited to check into a hotel in my entire life. I went downstairs, checked in, and then ran around the hotel looking for the GM, and I found him, and I said, dude, Oscar, your overnight manager, he is fantastic. You'll never believe what he did. And he goes, yes, he is fantastic. Also, that had nothing to do with him. I said, what? He goes, a couple months ago, we sat down as a team. The flights have been really delayed into Utah. We wanted to systemize hospitality. That's what we came up with. If you check in after 2 a.m, we give you the key. You can check in the morning. They had systemized hospitality. He went on to tell me something even cooler. He goes, also, Oscar, not very hospitable. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, or at least he wasn't. But we gave him a system to follow. And the more he found himself coloring within the lines and experiencing reactions like the one he saw on your face, he got addicted, and now he is doing some of the most extraordinarily hospitable things for everyone that walks into this place. Hospitality can be inspired. You can get people hooked on it if you decide that it matters. We did thousands and thousands of these things, the Dreamweaver touches, the toolkit stuff. And in 2017, we went back to the 50 best, 7 years later. This time it was in Melbourne, Australia. New, larger-than-life auditorium, new, fancy tuxedo. Got there, they started the countdown. Number 50, thank God, not us. Number 40, still not us. Number 30, still not us. At number 20, I'm gonna be honest, I blacked out for a little bit. I came back to at 5, not us. 4, not us. 3, not us. Okay, now you know this works, right? If they name the number 2 restaurant, it's not you, you know you've won. And there's some poetic justice here, and I'm only saying this because he's become one of my closest friends, but guess who the other restaurant was? The frickin' Italian guy. They called his restaurant as number 2. We became the number 1 restaurant in the world. Thank you. Thank you. But it wasn't because of our excellence. Don't get me wrong, excellence is important, and in fact, it's a prerequisite to most of the things I'm talking about today. What I am saying, though, is excellence in your product is table stakes. We became number 1 because we made the choice to be as unreasonable in pursuit of how we made people feel as every other restaurant on that list was solely in pursuit of the product they were selling them. I wrote this book, and I'm talking to groups like yours because I think in unreasonable hospitality, there is a win-win-win. It was great for the customers, right? We're in a season where we're just not used to people going above and beyond for us all that often anymore. And it feels really good when they do. It was great for our bottom line because, yeah, we spent some money on this stuff, although it's not about how much you spend, it's about how thoughtful you are. But every dollar I spent on this was much more powerful than any dollar I ever spent on traditional marketing. Because you give people stories like this to tell, what do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna go out there and tell them over and over and over again. And one day you wake up with legions of ambassadors out there telling your story far better than you could ever tell it yourself. But most importantly, it was good for our team. Because for the first time, the people in the dining room, they had autonomy. They were no longer just serving a plate of food that someone else created. They were imbuing the experience with their own creativity, and I have yet to meet a single individual that won't give more of themselves to help something succeed than once they have had a genuine hand in determining what that thing is. Not to mention the fact that, well, we were all making people really happy, and I have yet to encounter a feeling more energizing than when I see the look on someone else's face when they receive a gift that I am responsible for giving them. So, okay, why did they ask a restaurant guy to come and speak to you? Well, listen, we may be serving people different stuff, but I think every single one of us in this room, we're all in the business of serving other people in work or in life, right? In that pre-meal meeting that I talked to you about, I sometimes would go out into the world and experience something and come back to the restaurant and talk about it for a week or so, and then never again. But I had another group of topics. I called them my permanent collection. Things that were so important to me, I'd tell my team about them over and over and over again. One of those was how there is nobility in service. I think it's important to do, no matter what you do for a living, to take the time to name for yourselves why it matters, why you're genuinely impacting other people. Because I don't care how much you love your job, sometimes work stinks. And if you don't know that your work is genuinely impacting other people's lives, it's hard to bring your most fully realized self to the table on the difficult days. I would say to my team in restaurants, we may not be saving people's lives, but we can help them celebrate some of the most important moments. Conversely, we can give them the grace, if only for a few hours, to forget about their most difficult moments. Or if I'm getting super soapboxy, but I really do believe this, we can make the world a nicer place just by being really frickin' nice to everyone that walks through our doors and then standing back and watching as they go out and pay it forward. I would tell them, we have this beautiful opportunity, perhaps even a responsibility, to create our own little magical worlds in a world that needs more magic. Thank you. Thank you. And what I can say is that no matter what you do in work or in life, if you dig deep, you can create your own little magical world as well, because I don't care what you do for a living, you can make the choice to be in the hospitality industry simply by caring as much about people as you do about product. So I'm just here to provide a little encouragement that the next time you find yourself pursuing a relationship, and by the way, I'm using those exact words with great intention because for me, that's another definition of hospitality. Hospitality is being creative and intentional in pursuit of relationships. With your colleagues, your customers, with the people in your life, just try being a little bit more unreasonable. Give them that sense of belonging. Give them the kind of memories, the little ones or the big ones, that can last a lifetime. I promise you, it'll make you money. I promise you, it'll help you achieve whatever other goals you've set for yourself. But I can promise you this: A, it's the right thing to do. And B, it'll make you and everyone around you just feel really, really frickin' good. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
It only takes one leader, one moment to change the game for someone else. But what about you? What about that one moment that transforms your leadership? We all go through